All right, all right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. All right, so as usual, we're going to start with some announcements, and then we are going to do our recommended reading. I got a really good one for you guys tonight. We have our affirmation of the day. We'll do introductions and victories. We'll have an audiobook excerpt from chapter 4, our last night on chapter 4 tonight. We'll do a topic discussion, have a break at about 8:45-ish. We'll come back for our assignment, questions and answers, and we'll wrap it up by 9:30. Our first announcement, a reminder that tonight's workshop is being recorded and will be available on the BeBiggerToday.com website and YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. Please feel free to stop your video and or mute your microphone if you do not wish to be seen or heard on the recording. All right, I still have a few left. This is the author signed paperback. You get an exclusive 20% discount by using the code BOOK20 at checkout at BeBiggerToday.com. I will sign this personally to you, and this is the first edition. When these are done, there will be no more first editions printed. We'll be moving on to the second edition, which will hopefully be available in the next few weeks. My book, New York Cityscape, the ultimate New York City photo book. It's a collaboration between myself and 6 other NYC area photographers. We all have our exclusive take on the New York City landmarks and icons that you all know and love. I'm very proud of this book. As I said, it's a collaboration with 6 other photographers. We each have our own chapter in the book. And so it's really interesting to see each of our individual takes on the different landmarks and structures in New York City. Get it for $16.95 on sale for a limited time only at BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. And the audiobook, we're inching along. It's still available for pre-order at $9.99. It's going to be close to 10 hours when it's completed. And it comes with a money-back guarantee. If you don't love it, just let me know and I'll send you your money back, no questions asked. Same with the paperback, author-signed paperback. But I know you're going to love it. BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. We have some merch, hats and t-shirts, one size fits all, unisex style. Use merch 20 at checkout. BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And my original fine art photography and abstract images. These are professionally framed and signed by me. And a little commercial for you guys. Peter's photos and abstract designs are uniquely beautiful, one-of-a-kind works of art. These gallery-wrapped canvas prints are set in a contemporary shadow box floating frame and will enhance the beauty of any home or office. Available in 4 different sizes, each piece is professionally framed and comes complete and ready to hang. Frames are available in your choice of black, white, or brown, and each is signed by the artist. Peter's original art and photography will make a great gift for a client, for yourself, or someone you love. Order yours today. These are some of my best shots. Available in 4 different sizes. And really proud to be able to offer them to you guys. Speaking of some of my best shots, we have New York City refrigerator magnets. This is the penultimate collection of refrigerator magnets, my original photos. And once again, I'll tell you guys there's a story. These are available at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And there is a story behind these refrigerator magnets. If you are interested, go to my website, BeBiggerToday.com, and look for this image on the homepage, and that will take you to an article that I wrote for Morning Laziness about how those souvenirs came about. I'm available for one-on-one coaching and corporate consulting. If you are a creative person, an artist, a photographer, a writer, and you'd like to kickstart your career, I can help you with that. Or if you work for a company or have a company, you'd like me to come and talk to your management team, your sales team on how they can be bigger than they think they are, please get in touch with me through the website at bebiggertoday.com. bebiggertoday.com. And finally, I am accepting donations. I'm looking for support to continue to be able to offer the workshop for free and keep it open to everyone. So I have a suggested donation of $5 a week or $20 per month. You can send your donations to paypal.me/Peter Alessandria. That's all one word. Of course, nobody is turned away for lack of funds. Just donate as you feel moved to, or if you feel moved to. And I will thank you in advance for your wonderful support. All right, so we're on to our recommended reading for tonight. So this is a good one. The title of the book is Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul, and this book was written by Jane Roberts. Now, for anybody who's familiar with law of attraction, in particular Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, Jerry and Esther Hicks, they actually attribute this book or these series of books by Jane Roberts as kind of what got them started on their own exploration of the metaphysical, spiritual, and the law of attraction work. So I was moved not long ago to go, because I hear them talking about it in their classes and everything. So I was moved to go back and look for myself. And so I went back and started listening to, there's a whole series of books, actually there's 3 or 4, plus some other material that was written by Jane Roberts. Now this was written back in the 70s, I believe. And this is channeled material, which means in this case, Jane went into trance and then the voice of Seth came through her. And that's actually how Esther Hicks works with law of attraction. That's how A Course in Miracles was written, kind of. Actually, there was not a trance involved, but it was channeled material. There's a lot of stuff out there that's been channeled through human consciousness that comes from a higher source, from a higher level of consciousness. So this is one of those books, very powerful for me. I highly recommend this book as well as the other books in the series. I'll highlight them at a later time. You can find out more at, Jane has passed away, but there's a foundation that provides trainings and classes based on Seth's material, and that's at sethlearningcenter.org. Now, this book you can get online, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it wherever you buy books. It's also available as an ebook. So I've listened to this many times, very powerful material, highly recommended. Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul by Jane Roberts. All right, so here's our affirmation of the day. I am totally irresistible. Now, once again, I'm going to say that if you do not believe or do not appreciate the power of affirmations, it's my belief, it's my experience that most of us, or at least I'll speak for myself, walk around all day affirming negatively, saying to myself over and over again things like, not that I'm totally irresistible, but that I'm totally unlovable, nobody's going to like me. I have this whole litany of negative affirmations based on who I think I am, based on some childhood experiences that then carried over into my adult life. And just imagine how our lives would be different if we all walked around all day saying to ourselves, I am totally irresistible. I am totally irresistible. People love me. I am totally irresistible. And of course, that's the truth of who we are. I mean, if you look at a little baby, it's hard not to love a little child. Well, that little child is still alive in us. And even whether or not you believe that, there's nothing to say that the adult is not also totally irresistible, totally lovable, totally worth being loved. All right, so I enjoy walking around. I do this as part of my affirmations in the morning, and then I kind of try to remind myself during the course of the day that I am totally irresistible. And honestly, I'm the only one who has to think that. But it elevates my mood. It changes my state. Again, I've mentioned this several times in the past. If you like Tony Robbins, he talks all the time about we have to change our state. We have to change. God, I'm irresistible. We have to change our state, okay? We have to shift our emotional ground of being if we want to have a new experience of life. If I'm walking around angry or depressed or feeling sorry for myself or whatever I might be doing, I'm going to have one experience of life. If I change my state, if I move to a higher level, a higher vibration, a higher level emotional state, emotional level, we talked about how emotion is energy in motion. So when I'm low emotionally, I'm going to be low energy. I'm going to be low physical. I'm going to be low in terms of my motivation. I'm going to be low in terms of what I put out there in the world and what I accomplish in my life. So affirmations are a great way to change our state, and saying something over and over again like I'm totally irresistible. I mean, at a certain point it could even become funny, but in any event, what it does is I feel better. When I say positive things to myself about myself, when I say positive things to myself about myself, I feel better. The positive thoughts lead to positive feelings, lead to positive words and actions, lead to positive outcomes. All right? So not only am I totally irresistible, but I believe you're totally irresistible too. And if you tell yourself that enough, you might actually start believing it. All right. So this is the portion of the workshop where we have an opportunity for people to introduce yourself if you're new, or you can share a victory from the last week, something you're celebrating. So if you'd like to chime in, this is a great time to unmute yourself and say hi or share a victory. Judy.
I have a huge victory.
Great.
I shared it with Cindy earlier. I made a video today, actually about an hour ago. The countdown was really to have it submitted to be seen by Thursday, which is tomorrow. So, and I don't know if anybody else in our group really did one, but I did it. I did it. You don't know how this has been hanging on my head, because what I mean is I needed to do it for me. I don't care about them tomorrow. Like, I just needed to do this for me to get over that fear barrier, so to speak, of just doing it. And I think I did a pretty good job. My husband watched it. I just had him watch it. And he said, oh, it's pretty good, you know? So it's huge. This is truly a huge, huge breakthrough. I hope I can continue. And I am, bigger and better than I ever thought I could be. So.
Well, okay, Judy, I only have one thing to say, and I haven't said this in a while. Woohoo!
Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations. I love hearing that. Now, if I could ask you, let me just ask you a question or two. So, well, what was the basis, do you think, what was the basis of the fear? Because we talked about fear as resistance, and resistance is when we don't do stuff that we want to do or are supposed to do or have to do or whatever. So what was the fear that was causing the resistance, which was this barrier that you had to jump over? What do you think was causing that?
Fear causing the resistance, that I'm not good enough, that I can't do this. I mean, I've done other videos and I've been very not animated or whatever. And I changed what I did. I decided to actually write out a dialogue for the video. And some people believe in that, some people don't. But and I pasted it in front of me. It's still there. So I could kind of look at it and look at the screen. I have a really hard time talking to myself. I never could role play, and I'm in professions where I should be able to do that, but it's not a comfort zone of mine at all. So, just not being, not feeling that I'm good enough, that, I'm a perfectionist is the problem. And that gets in the way. And that is, the worst form of procrastination, and I think it's all based in fear. That's where I come from. But this was huge, and I have to tell you, I've been doing some readings lately, and one this morning was all about exactly what I did today. You know, this woman, actually, a little story was, this woman went to this guy on the beach, a young man, and said, "Can I talk to you a minute?" And he really didn't want to talk to anybody. And he said, "Okay." And it turned out that she wanted to talk to him because she was afraid to talk to young men. She had a lot of fear around that. And she knew that by doing it, she would break through her fear and walk away in a better place, you know. And that's kind of like what I did today. I've been thinking about this all week. I mean, for 2 weeks now. It's like, what are we going to do? The tapes. And finally bit the bullet. I mean, it took preparation. It's just not like I just sat down and said, "Hi, how are you?" You know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work for me, but I did it. And I shared it with Cindy. She thought it was pretty good because she's seen me before.
So that's great. So is it fair to say that after having this experience, you now see yourself a little differently?
Yeah, like I can do this again. I was thinking that. I mean, I feel like a ton of bricks have been lifted off my shoulders. I feel really good about myself. You know, it's the resistance, you know, like stands in the way of moving forward, because I believe that, you know, I'm meant to do all this stuff, or why would I be trying to do this? Or put it this way, I believe that there's a power greater than myself that wants me to be better and to do what I'm doing. It's good work. You know, it's good work. I mean, yes, I might make money from it, but it's also good work. You know, so we'll see, because it's a Facebook ad, and we'll see if anything comes of it or not. You know, and I don't care. But see, it doesn't matter because I did it.
The thing I noticed for me, and maybe this is true for you or not, but the thing I noticed for me is that the weight of the anticipation and the reticence and the weight of the bricks on the shoulders, it was all just my own negative thinking about myself. There's nobody criticizing me. There's nobody
Right.
shaming me.
Absolutely. We are, put it this way. The space between my ears can be a rotten playground to be playing in, especially when it involves me alone.
And so now, is it fair to say you're reprogramming all that?
Well, I've been working on reprogramming that for years, but in this area, I think, this will make it easier for me, so much easier the next time, to just jump in and just not have feel all the angst I've been feeling about this. I mean, this has just taken up too much space and energy.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about, and I think
Well,
most people on this line know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I totally get
Well, they
it.
wouldn't be here.
You got to remember, I was behind the camera for 15 years. So the minute I started doing this, it was like, and this takes, you're right, it takes a lot of preparation. But mostly for me now, it just takes, it takes a lot of self-love and a lot of being my own best friend instead of my own worst enemy. And even if I screw something up now, I don't beat myself up nearly as much. It's just, I treat myself differently and I see myself differently as a result. And then I have a different experience in the world. And I'm providing a service, you're providing a service, we're being of service to other people when we get out of the way. And it's the self, I don't want to say it's self-will, it's the obsession with self. What are they going to think of me? Are people going to like me? Am I going to mess this up? And am I going to feel like a jerk? Am I going to look like a jerk? That's what blocks us from being of maximum value to our fellows, making a contribution in the world and all of that. So I love that you're pushing through that. I love that I'm pushing through that. I know other people on the call are pushing through that. So I want to acknowledge you. That was great. Thank you, Judy.
One other little thing. It's a victory for somebody else, but, I believe in ditties, like they're forms of affirmation, but putting some music to them. And I'm working with somebody who's just really, really struggling with their problem. And I'm getting phone calls now with whole songs about their victories. It is fabulous. I just have to tell you. And I mean, these aren't just mine, are more like one-liner things like, I love me, I love me, I love me, and I sing it, or I did it, I did it, I did it. But this is someone like putting words that rhyme to it. And I just thought, wow, and they've got 4 days of being free from something, and they haven't had a day for months, so you never know what's going to work for somebody.
That's great. Well, and as I say, it's willingness, and I always say willingness is just another word for courage. And the only reason I need courage is because of the fear, and the fear for me comes from the self-recrimination, the self-loathing, the self-recrimination, the ways I have not been very nice to myself. Because, other people, for the most part, other people are much nicer to me than I am to myself, And when I realized that, it was like, oh my God, I don't have to worry about what they think of me. I just have to worry about what I think of me. And that turns out to be good news because I'm in control of that. I get to choose. I get to exercise my true power and consciously and deliberately choose to see myself in a positive, loving, positive way. So great. Thank you, Judy. Anybody else want to share a victory or just say hi? All right. So let's see what's next on our agenda. So we're back. We're still, tonight's going to be our last night on chapter 4, from FEAR to LOVE. It's been quite a journey through this chapter. And we'll move on to chapter 5, obviously, next week. So we're going to finish up tonight with, well, as you'll see in a minute. So I'm going to play the excerpt from the audiobook, and then when we come back, we'll do a little topic discussion and go from there. Taking our power back. In the last chapter, we talked about some of the ways we give our power away, such as by blaming others, making excuses, seeing ourselves as victims, etc. It turns out that being afraid is the biggest way most of us do this. When faced with a scary situation, we in effect say, "Situation, you decide for me how I should think, feel, speak, or act." Anytime we let an external circumstance or condition dictate our internal state, we're giving up our true power. Thus, the best way to take our power back is to face our fears directly by getting into action. For instance, when I picked up the phone to make a cold call, I was taking my power back. Prior to that, fear was paralyzing me. I wasn't doing anything and I felt terrible. Yet every time I pushed through my fear and made a call, I experienced a surge of energy. I felt empowered by my action rather than disempowered by my fears. When we face what we're afraid of, we're changing who we think we are. This is because we must see ourselves differently to do things differently. Taking on something that previously terrified us is evidence that we see ourselves in a new way. The key is to love ourselves enough to make it safe for us to take the actions that we've been afraid to take. Whether it's starting a business, looking for a job, or asking someone out on a date, it's self-love that provides the safety we need to move forward. Safety from what? In most cases, from our own self-recrimination. Recall that it was my self-recrimination that made cold calling so difficult at first. It was my own rejection of myself that made taking those actions so hard. False evidence appearing real. We started this chapter by talking about the difference between fear and caution. We said caution was a rational response to the vicissitudes of life, while fear is often an irrational, disproportionate reaction based on our own subjective perceptions. For this reason, perhaps the most important thing we can say about fear is that it's not real. While it may seem real to us, being based on our own subjective interpretations of life, fear itself has no objective basis in reality. This is shown by the fact that each person's experience in a given situation will be different. How we react emotionally is based entirely on how we see ourselves, rather than what's actually going on around us. Let's look at an example. Suppose there's a building on your street that's engulfed in flames. You know there are people inside and your mind is racing as you try to discern how you can help. After assessing the situation, you quickly come to the conclusion that this is probably way more than you can handle. You've already called the police, but while you're waiting, you're frozen in place. You're torn between the thought that the people inside need help right now and the fear that you could easily lose your own life if you go into that building. Thankfully, a moment later, a fire truck arrives. Several firemen and women jump off the truck, throw on their protective gear, and rush right into the middle of that burning building. They rescue all the inhabitants and eventually put out the fire. You stand relieved and grateful. The people inside were saved, and you weren't the one who had to do it. Now, there are a few important points to be gleaned from this little incendiary adventure. First, whose perception of the situation was correct? You were paralyzed with fear. The firefighters apparently not so much. We could say that the fear was real for you, but does that mean it was real in fact? Second, and more importantly, hopefully by now you recognize that your fear was based solely on how you saw yourself in that situation and not the situation itself. Your experience was a result of your subjective interpretation of who you thought you were vis-a-vis the fire. The rescue personnel's experience of the same circumstances was apparently very different. Because they saw themselves as being able to handle the situation, they raced into action rather than being paralyzed with fear. Yes, they may have had some reservations about entering the building, and yes, it may have taken years of training and thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment for them to see themselves the way they did. But the point is, both you and they responded to the situation based on how you saw yourselves. With regard to this specific example, given your complete lack of preparedness, not entering the building was clearly the right thing to do. Yet the fact remains that how we respond to a given set of circumstances is entirely dependent on how we see ourselves. In terms of rescuing people from burning buildings, thankfully most of us will never face a situation where the stakes are so high. But we also probably won't need years of training and thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment to change who we think we are in the situations we do face. Therefore, the reason we can say fear is not real is because when we change how we see ourselves, the fear has the potential to lessen or even entirely disappear. Why we do what we do. As we bring this chapter to a close, hopefully now we have a new way to address our fears. As always, seeing ourselves differently is the path to a new experience. We also said a few moments ago that changing who we think we are by getting into action is the best way to overcome our fears. So it's important to look closer at why we do what we do. It turns out all our choices and decisions have a common motivation. The particulars of the situations may be different, but the purpose behind our actions is always the same. We'll take a closer look at what that purpose is in the next chapter. All right, so that's our audiobook excerpt for tonight. Now, I think what I want to start talking about is this idea of giving our power away and taking our power back. So one of the things I noticed is that, so there's this phenomenon. So in chapter 3, I talked about the concept of true power. And I said that for me, for most of my life, I thought power was having power over other people. And what I found out is that true power is having power over myself. Now, what does that mean? Well, the way I define true power is the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Now, it occurs to me that those are the only 4 things we actually have power over in this lifetime. And because I can't change, I can't control external conditions, I certainly can't change or control other people. I can try to control other people. And I must say, for part of my life at least, I was pretty good at manipulating other people to get what I wanted. And I wasn't much in the way of brute force or anything like that, but I could charm people into I could imagine I was charming people into doing things that maybe they didn't otherwise want to do, but because I was so persuasive or so irresistible, whatever it might be, that they were willing to comply. But even in that case, if they're willing to comply, then they're actually choosing to do what they do. It's not me. I don't have any power over somebody else's thoughts, feelings, words, or actions. And it's really important to remember that. So when I give my power away, basically what I'm giving away is the ability to choose my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. The way I act or react to a particular situation or a particular person. Now, I can't really do that. I can't actually give away my power to choose or my ability to choose my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. So what I'm really doing, and what I've done most of my life, is I'm still choosing what I think, how I feel, what I say, and what I do, but now I'm blaming somebody else for that. And I'm saying, well, it's your fault because you're doing that, I feel the way I do, and so it's your fault that I feel the way I do. Or because I think you like me so much, then I feel good about myself, so it must be your fault that I feel good about myself. So I'm blaming somebody else for how I feel, for what I think, feel, say, or do. That's giving my power away. That's basically saying I don't have control over how I feel about myself. I don't have the ability to choose in this moment what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm saying or doing. Instead, I'm giving my power away. I'm saying the situation is choosing what I think. The situation is choosing what I feel. The situation is choosing for me what I say and what I do. Now, when I put it in those words, see, normally we say, well, the situation is making me feel this way. The situation is making me think this way. It's the situation's fault that I'm saying and doing the things I'm saying and doing. But I think it brings some clarity and some precision back to the conversation to say, well, then basically what we're saying is, situation, you're choosing for me what I think, feel, say, and do. Or other person, this person is choosing my thoughts, my feelings, my words, and my actions for me. And that's how I give my power away. I give my power away by blaming other people. Again, it could be positive or negative. I could blame you for how good I feel, or I can blame you for how bad I feel. I blame the situations and circumstances of my life. Right now, my photography business, been a rough 12 months, or coming up on, rough 10 months. And I can very easily blame those circumstances, those conditions for how I'm feeling, or what I'm saying, what I'm doing. And so there's many ways that we give our power away. So by blaming, by complaining, and I think for me personally, I've seen that one of the primary ways I give my power away is through fear. One of the primary ways I give my power away, see, I made a mistake, and I can still love myself. In fact, I can have fun with it. One of the primary ways I give my power away is through fear. And when I'm afraid in a particular situation, I'm saying, situation, you decide for me what I think, how I feel, what I say, and what I do. And the example that I like to give around this is public speaking. For most of my life, I dreaded the thought of speaking in front of an audience. I would shake and I would sweat and I would stammer, and that was before I even got on stage. I mean, it was so bad when I was younger that I would kind of dissociate. I was so self-conscious and so anxious that I would dissociate I would literally kind of leave my body. And it was just, I would freeze up and I couldn't say anything. So needless to say, I had issues with public speaking. And what I was doing was I was giving my power away to the situation. And I was imagining in my head that all these people were thinking bad things about me. They were not going to like me. It was going to be terrible. It was going to be painful. It was going to be humiliating. I was going to feel ashamed. And it's very interesting that was the experience that I was creating for myself. And as I said many times, it had nothing to do with the people in the audience. It was all me. It was all how I saw myself, who I thought I was, and how I treated myself as a result. So the fear that I was feeling was from the fear of my own self-incrimination, because I knew I was going to beat myself up because I was such a bad public speaker. I knew I was going to think poorly of myself. I'm unattractive. I'm stupid. I don't have anything meaningful to say. Nobody's going to like what I have to say. I had this whole litany of things that I was not even aware. I mean, it's buried in the subconscious, but this whole program of subconscious negative thoughts about myself, that's what was creating the fear. What was going on in here, remember, our thoughts lead to our feelings. And the problem is we're not always conscious of our thoughts. In fact, we're often not conscious of the negative thoughts because, as I say in the book and as we talked about first chapter or two, I mentioned this, when the negative thoughts are so painful, when they degrade us as human beings, when they're so negative, especially as kids, we dissociate from those thoughts. And that means that we literally take these negative thoughts and beliefs about ourselves and push them down below the surface So now they're in our subconscious or even maybe unconscious. I don't really know the difference. You got to ask Freud about that. But they're out of our awareness. And yet, they're running our lives, and we don't even know it. So my negative program, nobody's going to like me, I don't have anything good to say, I'm unattractive, I'm stupid, the whole train of thoughts, I'm not even really aware of it, and yet it's creating an emotional reaction in my body. And then the few times I actually did attempt to do some public speaking, I was totally couldn't speak, and I was not making any sense, and it was just horrible. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The point of that whole story is I was giving my power away to the situation through fear. All right, so take our power back means I no longer, first of all, I have responsibility. This is chapter 2 in the book. The whole second chapter is devoted to taking responsibility. I am responsible for what I think, feel, say, and do. Regardless of what's going on around me, regardless of what other people are doing and not doing, regardless of the circumstances and conditions of my life, I am still responsible for how I think, what I feel, what I say, and what I do. And the key thing to remember is responsibility is not the same as blame. See, most of my life, and I think most people do this, we equate taking responsibility with guilt, with liability, with, admitting that we're bad, screwed up people, admitting that I made a mistake. When I think that taking responsibility is about blame and shame and feeling guilty and feeling bad about myself, I don't want to admit my mistakes to anybody because it's so painful. It's more, if I admit that I made a mistake, it's just more proof that I'm a bad person, that I'm unlovable, that I'm unworthy, that I'm a screw-up. So when I have that frame of mind, I'm not going to want to take responsibility for anything that's going on in my life. So the first step is to begin to acknowledge that my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are about me. I'm always choosing, I always have the ability to choose, and I'm always choosing how I feel about myself, what I think, what I feel, what I say, and what I do. That's the first step in taking my power back. Because it's when I deny responsibility, when I point my finger at that other person or that situation and say it's their fault that I feel the way I feel, then guess what? I'm powerless to change that. If somebody else is to blame for how I feel, then I can't change how I feel because it's their fault. If it's the situations and circumstances of my life that are making me feel the way I feel, then I'm powerless to change those things until the external circumstances and conditions change. So I got it all set up. My life is not my fault. My life is everybody else's fault, and everybody else is responsible for how I feel. And guys, I live that way, and I still live that way from time to time. If I'm on the highway and somebody cuts in front of me and I have a negative reaction, you know what? I just gave my power away. I just blame somebody else for how I feel. If somebody cuts in front of me and I say, you effing jerk, guess what? I just gave my power away. I'm blaming that person for how I feel. Now, I'm not saying what he did was right, or maybe it was a woman. I'm not saying that what that other driver did was right or correct or courteous or any of that. Okay? But that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how I respond to what somebody else is doing. And depending on the circumstances, I may hold that other person accountable for their actions. I'm not saying we don't do that. I'm not saying we don't take care of ourselves. I'm not saying, we don't hold other people accountable. But it doesn't change the fact that how I feel is about me and not about what that other person did or didn't do. It's not about what circumstances, what's happening in the world, what's happening in my life. My thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are always about me. I have the ability to choose, consciously choose. That's true power. True power is the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. But I got to tell you, as long as I think it's everybody else's fault that I feel the way I feel, My life is never going to change, and the only thing I'm going to do is be angry at everybody else because they're not acting the way I think they need to act so I can feel okay, so I can be happy, so I can feel secure, whatever it is that I think I'm going to feel when they change. And you know, it becomes, my life is not about creating my own life. My life is not about moving forward and pursuing my own vision, my own dreams, you know, making my life happen. My life is sitting back and judging everybody else who's not acting the way I think they're supposed to be acting and are causing me to feel that way I'm feeling. It's a very disempowered way to live. So, I'm suggesting that, I didn't actually put on the slide, but the first step in taking our power back is taking responsibility for our lives. And again, responsibility is not a bad thing. It's not about blaming, shaming, or making ourselves wrong. In fact, the way I defined it, if you remember in chapter 2, the way I defined taking responsibility, responsibility is the 3 A's: awareness, accountability, and action. When I think of responsibility in that way, as opposed to liability, guilt, shame, blame, I have a whole different experience. So awareness, what is awareness? It's just being conscious, it's being present in the moment that something I've done, said or done, has had a negative effect on myself or somebody else. Just being present, being aware, being conscious. Number 2, accountability. This is when I become willing to be accountable to somebody else or myself for any harm or damage that I've caused. Now we're going to talk a lot about all of this in chapter 6 and 7 and the amends process. But for those of us who are familiar, for instance, with the 12 steps, you know, part of our working the steps is taking responsibility by making an amends, by becoming accountable, by being willing to be accountable to somebody else for our harmful behavior. And then part 3, step 3 is action. And the action is the amends, the apology, it's the setting things right. So when I think of taking responsibility as awareness, accountability, and action, what I found in my own life is that when I take responsibility, it actually boosts my self-esteem. I actually feel better about myself rather than feeling worse about myself. So it's actually, when I take responsibility for myself, it's an act of self-love. All right, so the first step in taking our power back is taking responsibility. And ultimately, it's my opinion, which is based on my experience, that we must see ourselves differently to do things differently. Now, it turns out this is actually really good news, because most of my life I've been trying to change everybody else. I've been trying to manipulate the circumstances and conditions of my life. I've been trying to manipulate other people, you know, to see it my way, trying to persuade them or seduce them or cajole them or manipulate them. So my life could be different. And now what I'm suggesting is no. If I want my life to be different, it starts with me seeing myself differently. It starts with me, changing how I see myself, who I think I am, what I'm capable of, what I have to offer the world. When I do that, everything else takes care of itself. Everything else falls into place behind that. So, if I want to take my power back and if I want to have a different life, it begins with me seeing myself differently. Now, remember, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to words and actions, and then the words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in life. So when I think about myself differently, when I think about myself in a more positive way, I have more positive emotions. More positive emotions, I speak more positive words and take more positive actions. Speaking more positive words, taking more positive actions leads to positive outcomes. And my life is different. You know, trying to change other people, trying to manipulate other people, trying to change the circumstances and conditions of my life, that never works, because I don't have any power over those things. And the problem is I haven't changed. So I'm going to continue, at some point, I'm going to fall back into my old patterns of behavior, my old patterns of thinking, and I'm going to continue to create the same experiences that I had before. All right. So taking our power back starts by taking responsibility, and then we must see ourselves differently to do things differently. So I'm kind of coming to the crux of the matter here, and the end of chapter 4, as you heard in the audiobook tonight. The thing that I have found to be true about fear is it truly is false evidence appearing real. I wasn't sure what slide was next. So false evidence appearing real. That means, if it's false evidence, that means it's not real. And so I think the strongest thing that I've learned about fear is that it's not real. At best, and it's not real in the sense that it's an objective phenomenon. At best, it's a subjective interpretation that we have of the situation or of the world in general based on how we see ourselves in that situation. Remember, the problem is never the situation. The problem is always and only how we see ourselves in that situation. And again, that's really good news because we can always change how we see ourselves. So if the fear that I'm feeling is false evidence appearing real, then what I found is I got to back it up and look at, okay, so what are the thoughts in my head, in my mind, whether it's the conscious mind or the subconscious mind, that are creating the emotion of fear? So what are the negative thoughts that are generating the emotion, the feelings of fear, anxiety, worry, concern, and all of that? And what I said for me was, my definition of fear is an emotional response, emotion, energy and motion, an emotional response to a perception of myself as either powerless and or unlovable in a given situation. So it's this idea that I have about myself that I'm powerless and or unlovable. That idea creates the feeling of fear, anxiety, worry, concern. And then the emotion of fear leads to words and actions that reflect fear. So again, my experience with public speaking, the fear was so bad that I couldn't speak. I couldn't open my mouth. The negative thoughts created feelings so strong that they stopped my ability really to communicate. And as I said, especially when I was younger, I would kind of just dissociate from the whole situation. I was just completely gone. So, and it's just so an emotional response to a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable in a given situation. Now, again, those of us who've been around 12-step programs, we hear a lot about powerlessness. The way I'm using it here, powerless is kind of like helpless, can't take care of myself, something bad is going to happen and I'm not going to be able to protect myself or do anything about it, especially challenging if other people are involved. So this sense of I'm not going to be okay and there's nothing I can do about that. When I see myself as not being okay and not being able to do anything about that, that's the thought that creates the feeling of fear, the anxiety, the stress, the concern, the worry. And or unlovable. So powerless and or unlovable. Unlovable is just that. There's something about me that's not okay. There's something about me that's not acceptable to other people. I am not worth being loved. And as a result, I'm going to experience shame, I'm going to experience humiliation, I'm going to experience rejection, and there's nothing I can do about that. Because it's one thing for somebody to reject me, but it's another thing if they reject me and then I think, well, I can't change how I feel about myself. They must be right about me being unlovable, and I know from when I was a kid that feels really bad. It feels really, really bad. And if I'm really unlovable, then there's nothing I can do about that. And so my relationships are just going to be one disappointment after another. They're just going to be one painful, humiliating, shameful experience. That stuff was programmed, implanted, ingrained in my thinking as a little kid, and I carry that into my adult life. But again, because it's so painful to think of ourselves in that way, we bury it, we dissociate from it. So now I kind of feel, I know, I have this vague feeling that there's something about me that's not okay and people don't like me and it's going to be a problem, but it's not really in the forefront of my thinking. It's not a conscious thought that's driving me in the moment. But the minute I get in the situation that triggers those old thoughts based on these perceptions that I have of myself and other people, then the feeling comes up, then the emotion kicks in, the fear starts. And fear is resistance, and fear leads to avoidance behaviors. So I avoided a lot of things in my life out of fear. I avoided public speaking, for most of my life. I avoided certain relationships with certain people. I avoided taking certain risks, healthy risks that would have moved my business and my life forward. I was afraid to send out my photos. When I first started as a photographer, I was afraid to send them out because I was sure it was just going to be more confirmation that I was a bad person. I was a bad photographer. I was not good enough. I was unworthy. I didn't have what it took. And so for 3 years, I couldn't send my photos out. I wasn't even really taking many photos. So what happens is the negative thoughts create the negative feelings. The negative feelings create the resistance. We don't do what would help us move forward in life. So false evidence appearing real, when we change how we see ourselves, the fear has the potential to lessen. So when I no longer see myself as unlovable, when I no longer see myself as powerless, when I begin to believe that I'm somebody who can take care of himself in all situations and with all people, guess what? The fear goes way down. The anxiety goes way down, and I can do something like this. I can sit in front of a camera for an hour and a half and talk, whereas in the past, that would not have been possible. When I change how I see myself, I change how I feel. When I change how I feel, the fear has the potential to lessen or even entirely disappear. Now, here's the whole point of all of this. If all I need to do is change how I see myself in order to feel differently, then was the fear real in the first place? Was it real in the sense of an objective phenomenon, or was it something that was just conjured in my mind? If I can disappear fear, by just changing how I see myself, is it real? Is fear real, or is it truly false evidence appearing real? So I offer that to you guys. Let's look at this last slide because it's almost 9 o'clock already. For me, again, and I've said this many times, and I was referring it actually earlier when Judy was sharing, and what I realize for me is that it's the self-recrimination, it's the negative thoughts and beliefs about myself that create the fear of rejection, the fear of criticism, the fear that people are not going to like me, the fear that I'm not good enough, and I'm going to be ashamed, I'm going to feel bad about myself, and there's nothing I can do about it. So the antidote to fear, we said earlier in this chapter, I talked about, Course in Miracles says fear is the absence of love. It's very interesting to think about fear that way, because what it means is to dissipate the fear, to evaporate or eliminate the fear. All I really need to do is bring love to the situation, bring love to myself or to another person. So my experience with public speaking changed when I began to love myself rather than beat myself up for being less than perfect. My experience of submitting my art, my photos for shows and exhibitions changed when I brought love to myself, when I brought compassion to myself, when I comforted myself with kind words, telling myself I'm a good photographer, telling myself I'm going to love myself no matter how this submission goes. By consciously and deliberately, remember, true power, the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. So by consciously changing my thoughts about myself, I consciously change my feelings about myself. I'm bringing love to the situation. I'm bringing love to myself. And again, if fear is the absence of love, by bringing love, I'm dissipating the fear. And I can say for me, my truth is that the key was to love myself enough to make it safe for me to take the actions that I've been so afraid to take. So again, I had a lot of fear about submitting my photos for publication, about submitting my photos for shows and exhibitions. And I was afraid to take those actions because I was so hard on myself because of the self-recrimination. So when I began to love myself more, when I began just to be nicer to myself, when I began to be more compassionate and more understanding and say, wow, there has to be some reason that I'm so afraid of public speaking. There has to be some reason that I'm so afraid to submit my photos, or even post the first few years, I couldn't even post my photos on Facebook. Now, for those of you who follow me on Facebook, it's kind of the opposite. But so what changed? And I can say for me, from the best I can tell, what changed was I stopped hating myself and started loving myself as best as I could. Believe me, I still have moments of self-recrimination. I still have moments of beating myself up for choices that I make. But I do it a lot less often, and I do it for a lot less time. And sometimes I don't do it at all. That has changed everything. Because again, if fear is resistance, and if the source of our fear is our own self-recrimination, then the thing we want to do, the key, is to love ourselves enough to make it safe for us to do the things that we have to do or want to do or would like to do. So that's bringing full circle. That's bringing fear and love full circle. The way to abolish fear from our lives is to bring love for ourselves or for another person. A lot of times I found that for me, again, when I'm having a conflict with somebody or when I'm having an issue with somebody, if I can stop and say, wait a second, maybe they're not just jerks, maybe they're not just an a-hole, maybe they're actually afraid of something, maybe they're feeling uneasy or concerned about something, can I help them feel safer? Can I bring love to them, to the situation, with compassion, with understanding? I have had this experience several times where when I do that, the whole thing changes. Instead of, remember, we said defensiveness begets defensiveness and anger begets anger. When I respond with defensiveness or anger, guess what? I'm going to get more of that. But when I respond with love, when I respond with forgiveness, when I respond with understanding, everything changes. And it's the same people, it's the same situation. The only thing that's changed is I brought love instead of fear to that situation. And as a result, I've had a completely different experience of it. All right, so it's already after 9, so we're going to take our break. If you're new here, what we do now is we take a 5-minute break. I'm going to play a song. If you're watching after the fact on my website or YouTube, you can't hear the song because of copyright issues. The song is Love My Life by Robbie Williams. The lyrics will be on screen so you can sing along if you're live tonight on the workshop. Otherwise, you got to go get the song from Amazon Music or iTunes, wherever you get music. So, and then we take 5 minutes, we'll come back, and then we'll start our assignment and our Q&A for tonight. Oh, wait, spoke too soon. So the other thing is, let's just look real quick at the assignment for tonight. This is the exercise. Basically what I've just been saying, but now I want to hear from you guys. Do you agree or disagree? Fear is not real. Now, I do want to say, actually, okay, we got it's going to be another minute before we take the break. I do want to say, none of this means that we don't, remember at the beginning of this chapter, I talked about the difference between fear and caution. Okay? We want to be cautious. We want to take precautions. We want to use common sense. All right? But what we don't want to do is be overwhelmed by an irrational emotional response of fear, anxiety, or whatever, to the point where it impairs our ability to make good decisions. Caution is different than fear. Caution means I'm using common sense, I'm taking rational precautions, I'm assessing the situation in a rational, objective manner. Fear is irrational. Fear is not objective, fear is subjective. And fear usually causes us to act in a way or to make choices and decisions in a way that don't serve us, that lead to problems. So I'm not saying don't use common sense. I'm not saying don't use caution. I'm not saying don't take care of yourself. But what I'm saying is we want to move away from this fearful reaction that could cause more problems than it solves. And so that's, in the spirit of that, I pose this question to you guys tonight about whether or not fear is real. Again, I get, subjectively, it feels very real in our body and all of that. But my point has been, if we can dissipate the fear by just changing how we see ourselves in that situation, was the fear really real? Or at least was the thing that we were responding to from a place of fear, is that real? All right, I'm going to take a break. So that's the exercise. We'll be back in a few minutes for that. And we're going to play our song. Got some new art. This is a photo of mine from, it's like 4 years ago. So it's actually a full moon shot of the moon rising behind the Empire State Building. It was so cold that night. It was like a January night, and I was on the water with some friends, and it was so cold and so windy. But it's a beautiful shot. All right, so let's get back to our program for this evening, our exercise. Fear is not real, agree or disagree, and why. Or if you want to talk about the transition from fear to love, or fear is the absence of love, or how self-recrimination affects you in your life, those are all good topics too. So who wants to lead us off? You can unmute yourself and let you take it away.
Okay, I'll take a risk. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Dee Dee.
Hi, everybody. Okay, first I thought fear wasn't real, but I want to disagree. I think fear is real, and that's why we're talking about it. I think that a lot of people, including myself, until we don't, we have the illusion or the feeling of fear. And specifically, you mentioned it before about how it affects inside the body. Once those chemicals are released, that is a real thing. What I love about this program, your teaching, your knowledge, and your experience, and I've had some experience with it too recently. Being able to change my thoughts, change the chemicals. It takes a while, but with the chemicals to create a new experience. I only wish that last year, when I was really under a lot of stress and I had a challenging experience with one of my family members, and then my father actually isn't here anymore. I can't go back and change that. I can just change how I act. Well, what I think, how I act. Well, what I think, which will change how I feel, and it'll change how I act and my words as well. My mom she's having surgery right now on her hip. She fell and broke her hip. So, these last couple of days with my sister, we haven't had any crosswords or, stress, even though there's a lot of opportunity for stress and freaking out or whatever. None of that's happening. And I'm doing the woo way, woo way, be bigger today way of being, is really owning my own thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And I had a friend call me today and say she was starting to spin out in a freak out. And I said, look, Peter tells me our thoughts create our feelings. And then because you're freaking out, look at your thoughts and then change them. It's really that simple. Now, is it easy? No. So I will keep coming back, and I just love the process, love to be with you. And that's it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Dee Dee. My best wishes for your mom with the surgery. And yeah, it is simple but not easy, and that's something that I keep reminding myself, and I remind you guys too, because I don't want to get down on myself. Gee, I have these old thoughts again, and the same feelings come up and all of that. I will say, maybe I could have phrased the assignment a little better. So I totally agree with you that the feelings, the reactions in the body are real. They have reality to them. The point I'm trying to make is the object of our fear, what it is that's triggering those emotions. For me at least, it seems like that's a little less solid, a little less of entrenched in some kind of reality. It's a subjective determination, again, based, gotta remember, everything I see is through the filter of who I think I am. It's my perceptual filter that creates my subjective interpretation of the world. And remember, we're never reacting to the situation. We're always reacting to the meaning that we give that situation, and that meaning is always a subjective meaning. So I totally agree with you. Once the fear manifests in the body, many years ago when I was afraid of public speaking, you would have never convinced me in that moment that those feelings weren't real. But the cause of that, it's the trigger for that, what is precipitating that, I think, for me at least, I can see now, because it can be changed so easily, it's not real it's in an objective, kind of objective reality sense. So, but good, thank you. You want to say anything else about all that, Dee Dee? You good?
Actually, I do. I just want to say that you've said it before. I've heard it in your program over and over again. It's like when I have the experiences that validate the perception of the feeling, then it kind of cycles over and over. So I just need to have more and more experiences that validate the experience of love, not fear. And that'll take care of everything. I love it. Mwah. Pat.
Beautiful. That's it. That's it. Because it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes in some cases, a vicious cycle or a beautiful cycle. So when I begin to change the thoughts, I change the feelings, I change the words and actions, and then my experience changes. And when my experience changes, I have a different feedback from the world. So the loop changes, and I'm changing the vibration. I'm raising it up. Again, law of attraction. Esther Hicks, she talks all about vibrations and how we attract into our lives. And actually, Seth, in the book that the recommended reading for tonight, Seth speaks. He talks all about the power of our vibration. What emanates from us attracts our experience. It attracts like attracts like. So if I'm walking around with, feeling like a victim, or I can't trust other people, or people are not trustworthy, then guess who I'm going to attract into my life? And I'm going to have evidence. And that's where it gets so confusing, because most people will say, well, no, it's not my thoughts. This really happened. This person did come into my life, and he stole all my money, and he wasn't trustworthy. And, but I'm going to suggest, well, I can only speak for myself. So I'm looking at whether or not the thoughts precede the experiences, and whether the experiences are just mirroring back to me my projection, my perception and my projection onto the world. Course in Miracles says, projection makes perception. Course in Miracles says we're actually projecting out onto the world, and then with our senses, it's coming back to us. So it looks like it's coming from out there. We don't realize the world comes from us, not to us, not at us. That'll be the next book. All right, great. Thank you, Dee Dee. Who else? Is fear real or not? Do you agree or disagree that fear is not real?
Okay, Peter, I will go.
All right.
Okay. I don't know if, well, I think it's fear that I have now, because tonight the government announced that we won't work for a month until the 8th of February. And so it's the second time. The last time was longer than this one. This one is for a month. But we don't know if in a month will be okay to work. And they put on a curfew. We can't be out after 8 until 5 in the morning. We can go out, and almost everything will be closed. And the fear is, will I be okay? Will I? No, we have the bill to pay even if we don't work. And it's the second time, and now I'm very afraid of those things that will happen. Will it end sometimes? Will it end soon? We got every country is affected by that virus. It takes a lot of place in our lives right now. So that's fear, but I don't know how to take it and to get it out of my mind. I find it very difficult. So that's it.
All right, great. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for sharing that. And I get it, totally get it. I feel for you, I feel for me, all of us. So, but this is great because this is a great opportunity now to take a look and say, in chapter 2, I said, stress comes from focusing on things we have no control over, as opposed to focusing on things we can control. So I know from the first go round with this that one of the things I can't control is the government regulations, the virus itself, how other people are reacting to the situation. I have no control over any of that. And when I focus on that stuff, I'm giving my power away, and I am creating a situation where I'm powerless. Since I don't have any control over that, I'm powerless. And remember, this sense that I'm powerless is what creates the fear. And so what we want to do is shift our focus, shift our attention. So I love what you said, is there a way for me to refocus my attention when I'm thinking, right?
I'm trying to do that. I don't know how to do it.
Okay, but you do. And if you don't, I'm going to remind you.
Yeah, I have to reprogram that in my head.
So what are the 5 tools that we have to reprogram our thinking?
Thoughts, going
Affirmations,
yes,
vision statement,
yeah,
guided visualization, meditation,
okay,
vision board, and the mind movie. Now, those are just 5 that I've come up with. You can also, something to help alleviate the fear is just to have an action partner, somebody that you speak to on a regular basis, and you guys work out a plan and say, you know what, I don't have any control over this, that, or the other thing, but I do have control over this, and today, this is what I'm going to get done. I got to tell you, I don't mean to in any way diminish anybody else's experience, but the pandemic has been really good for me in terms of writing the second edition of the book and getting the audiobook done. I would have never gotten it done. Same thing, you got to remember, the only reason this book came into fruition was when I hurt my leg, and I couldn't walk for 6 months. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything for 6 months. So my point is something positive, and I, there was no government support for me when I hurt my leg, and I didn't know how I was going to survive. So the point is something positive can come out of a situation even if we don't see it. And by having an action partner, having somebody that you talk to on a regular basis for support, mutual support is very helpful in times like this. And then using the positive affirmations, taking responsibility for how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing. The other thing that's also really helpful is, and I know you're really good at this, Lynn, is to support other people. Reach out to other people and give them support. Find out how they're doing, and when we focus on others people, we get out of our heads. We take the attention off of us and our problems, and we're of service to somebody else. So there are lots of things that we can do because we have control over that. If I have an action partner, if I call somebody up to give support or to get support, I can control that. I can't control what's going on with the government. I can't control what's going on in the economy. I can't control what's going on with everybody else in the world. So by focusing on what I can control and focusing on what I can change and how and who I want to be in the situation, because here's the other thing. Every difficult situation is just another opportunity for us to choose who we want to be. It's like working out. It's like exercising a muscle. We have to be challenged. There has to be something to challenge us so we can experience ourselves in a new way. I guess that doesn't have to be. I guess you can also change who you are or who you want to be when things are good. But when things are good, most of us just kind of coast, we don't try to be bigger than we think we are when things are good. It's only when we're challenged. So the point is, again, I want to say, I totally get it. I understand the fear. I understand the anxiety. It looks pretty grim in a lot of ways for a lot of us. And I still believe we have a choice. And it starts with what we focus our attention on, what we give our attention to. Remember, in a metaphysical sense, attention equals intention. So if I give my attention to all the bad things that could happen to me, then guess what? I'm intending that result. Whereas if I give my attention in a more positive way to more positive things, I bring about a different experience, a different result.
Yes, thank you. It's great.
Good.
I tried that. Thank you.
Yeah, try it. And it could just start with, I don't know how this is going to go, an affirmation like, I don't know how this is going to go, but I know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, great.
I know I can take care of myself. I know things will work out. And it's going to be a little challenging. It may be a little uncomfortable. It may be a little painful. But it doesn't, but I'm going to be okay. It's going to work out. Maybe something good can come from this.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. All right, we're already at 9:30, but I want to give other people a chance. Anybody else want to say anything?
Hi, I'm Helena. I want to say something, Peter.
Helena, go ahead.
Okay, so this is what my friend actually said. Fear. Okay, so fear. The first one is about fuck everything and run.
Yep.
Or if not, it's like a false evidence appearing, read, right?
Yep.
So I guess we can either face everything and rise or just run away, push it away. And I have a lot of fear. I mean, I'm very I don't know. I was just raised that way because I think I had a very strict father and perfectionism and all that. So I have a lot of fear. And recently I was learning about how I can replace this fear or anything that is negative. So for example, if I'm fearful, like I can make an affirmation by saying, I release my fear and I replace with joy and happiness. And then, I'll praise life because life is not about just getting everything the way I want. Life is also about a lesson. So I still need a lot of practice, but I'm just trying to get used to this like affirmation or like a self rephrasing, and also I'm writing a lot of feelings notes. Like when I feel really fear and anxiety comes to me almost every day. I face those fears. And one of my friend who actually lost one family member this year, actually last year, said to me, oh, you can just start to write your feelings down on a little notes, like just to write a date and time and just write about how you feel and ask yourself, like, why are you feeling this way? Is this good or bad? And find out what the core beliefs are, so that way, if I have a core beliefs that are really like disempowering me, I can try to remove it by having a conscious awareness. But if I'm just sitting there, stay frozen with a fear, and not trying to ask the questions, why am I feeling this fear? It's like I'm just permanently traumatized by fear. So I just wanted to share about that. Thank you.
Great. Yep. Good. Thank you. Totally get it. And again, for me, it's this understanding that the thought behind the fear is that I'm not going to be okay. I can't handle this. This is going to be painful. I'm going to lose something. There's some pain. There's some loss. There's something negative. But it's not the fact that there's something negative. It's the fact that the way I see myself is that I can't do anything about it. That's the disempowering fear, the disempowering thought that gives rise to the fear. Because the example I give, actually, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, in the audiobook tonight, the example that I give at the end of chapter 4 in the book it's a hypothetical, but it goes something like this. Imagine you walk out of your house one day and the building across the street is on fire. And you know there are people in there, and you have this sense that they need help and you want to help them, but you also know that if you run into that building, you could lose your own life. And basically what happens is you get paralyzed, you're just frozen. You call 911 or whatever, but you can't do anything. Well, a minute later, the fire truck arrives. The firemen and women, they jump off the truck, they throw on their gear, and they run right into the middle of that building. They go right past you, they almost knock you over. They go right into the middle of that building and they save the inhabitants and they put out the fire. Well, what was the difference in that situation? The difference was, now again, given your experience, who and what you are, it was probably a good idea that you didn't run into that fire. And again, I want to say we're not talking about, that we don't take precautions. We're not saying we don't use common sense. I'm not saying any of that. Fear, in a way, in an evolutionary sense, fear protects us because we're alert to dangers. We're alert to problems in the environment. That's the evolutionary value of fear. The problem is, and again, I say this at the beginning of this chapter and elsewhere in the book, what served primitive man when we were living in the jungle probably doesn't serve us so much these days. And instead of being afraid of saber-toothed tigers or woolly mammoths, now we're afraid of our mother-in-law, our boss, or the IRS. We've transferred the fear. So what was I going to say? So the fear is born out of the idea that I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. And that's the thought we want to change. So in the example of the fire, the building on fire, the firemen and women, they see themselves differently than I do, and they go right past me and they rush into that building. Now, the only difference is, the way I see it, the only difference is they see themselves differently than I do. And so they have a different experience and they take different actions. Now, you can also say, well, wait a second. The firemen and women, they spent years training for this. They have thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment. So of course they're going to see themselves differently. And I actually would agree with you, except I would say that for most of us, the situations, most of us are never going to have to run into a burning building. And in the situations we do face in life that challenge us, we don't need years of training and thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment to see ourselves differently. Those, whether it's our mother-in-law, our boss, or the IRS, I guess, we may want to put on depending on how inflammatory, pun intended, our mother-in-law is, we may want to wear protective clothing when we go over there for Thanksgiving dinner. But the point is, the only difference in that situation is how we see ourselves. My perception versus the fire people, it's totally based on the subjective perception of who I am in that situation, what I'm capable of and what I can do. Now, again, I want to be clear, in that situation, it's probably good that I don't run into the building. I'm really not equipped to handle that. So I'm not saying we don't use common sense. I'm not saying we don't use caution. But I will say again, most of us are not going to be running into burning buildings. Most of us are going to be walking into our boss's office to talk about our latest expense report. All right, so great. Thank you, Helena. Anybody, you want to say anything else, Helena? You're good.
Yeah, I was going to, but I forgot. I'm sorry. I'll tell you when I remember. Sorry.
All right, no worries.
Oh, I remember now, Peter, because so anyway, because of that, it makes perfect sense about this law of attraction, because the minute when I feel this fear, and if I don't switch over my brain to think differently, I'm going to attract that more fear and more stuff over to me, right? Because we're internally always attracting like attracts like. So it makes so much sense to me that I have to learn to change my thought pattern. Only way for me to be able to attract something opposite of fear, when I'm fearful.
Yeah, totally. And that's about taking responsibility for my thoughts and saying, wait a second, the situation is not causing me to feel the way I feel. What's causing me to feel the way I feel is how I see myself, who I think I am, my internal thoughts and feelings about myself. But if I'm not willing to take responsibility for all that, then I'm going to point fingers and say, no, it's your fault. You did this to me. Or it's her fault, or it's, the virus's fault, or whatever. So I have to be willing to take responsibility for my experience. And again, responsibility is not a bad thing. Responsibility is not about blame, shame, or liability. It's about getting our power back. At the end of chapter 2, I said, there's a very particular relationship between responsibility and power. And I said, I think most people are not really aware of that. And the relationship is responsibility and power are the same thing. You can't have one without the other. As long as I'm denying responsibility for something, for my thoughts, feelings, words, or actions, I'm powerless to change those things. And when I accept responsibility, then I can change, how I think, how I feel, what I say, and what I do. And that's the beauty of 12-step programs. That's the beauty of looking at our part in the situations of our lives that challenge us, and looking at how we contributed to that, taking responsibility and making an amends, setting things right, whether with ourselves or another. When I did my 9th step a couple of times, I made a formal amends to myself. So taking responsibility means making the amends, making the apology, changing, the living amends, changing our behavior towards ourselves and others. So it's, we can have a whole different life, but until we're willing to stop blaming everybody else for how we feel, we can't change anything. Until we take responsibility for all of it, we can't change any of it. But again, taking responsibility for all of it doesn't mean beating ourselves up for making mistakes. It doesn't mean beating ourselves up for being imperfect. And it doesn't mean beating other people up either.
So Peter, I have a question. So is your audiobooks available now?
I'm close. I'm
it's
still
getting
working
there.
on it.
Oh,
I was almost done, and I discovered a technical glitch. So I have to go through all 10 hours to weed out the glitches. So it's going to take me another couple of weeks.
All right.
But it will be available, and it's going to rock the world. It's really good. I mean, you guys have been hearing it, so
Yeah.
imagine all of it at once.
Is it
All
the
right.
same price? Is the same price as the book?
It's $9.99 right now for pre-order.
From what? I mean, from the audiobook?
The audiobook is $9.99, yeah.
So where can I get it? Is it ready? No, not yet, right?
You can pre-order. So if you buy it now, you'll get it as soon as it's available.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank
So
you.
it's bebiggertoday.com/bookstore.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, so let's play the song one more time, and then we will come back for our final goodbyes. All right, I see some people dancing. Two things. So number one is I'm doing my first podcast tomorrow. I'm being interviewed. First time I'm being interviewed for the book. I actually have done some other podcasts in the past for my photography, but tomorrow I'm going to be interviewed on the book. So the podcast is Fit for Joy. And when it's all edited, it's going to be a couple of weeks, I think, at least. But once it's all edited and ready to go, I'll let you guys know so you can listen to it if you want. And then the other thing is, some people asked about you guys connecting offline. So if there's anybody who wants to connect with other members of the workshop, if you email me, that you're interested and available, I'll try to coordinate you guys if you want to. And again, it's good to have an action partner with somebody who comes on the workshop regularly, that kind of thing, or if just, one time you want to connect with somebody. So if you're interested in doing that, reach out to me and then I'll connect everybody for that, for people who are interested. Anybody else want to say anything before we go?
I just want to, it's Dee Dee. I want to thank you for the cliffhanger for the next chapter. Why we do the things we do. I'll be back because I want to know that.
All right. So do I. All right, good. Anybody else? All right. So have a great week.
Peter, bye everybody. See you next
All right.
week.
Good night,
Bye.
guys.
Everybody.
Everybody have a
Bye.
great week.
Bye.